We don't ever recommend this, by the way. I'm just telling you right now. We never recommend you driving while podcasting. I don't think it's legal in any country in North America. It might be legal in Mexico because everything's legal there. But but right
Including
now,
prostitution.
including prostitution. Right now, Josh is riding back on Interstate 90. Josh.
Yes, Interstate 90. I am about 2.5 hours from the border, although I am going to be stopping at Carrabba's on the way back to grab my favorite Caesar salad to go. But 2.5 hours away, and tomorrow's back to the grind, back on the eating green diet. So
There you go.
now 2.5 hours from the border, and about four and change away from my house in Toronto on Interstate 90. I think I'm driving through Syracuse right now.
There you go. So if any of you are in Syracuse, you can pop on out and you see a man riding in an Armor All shirt, Under Armour shirt.
Under Armour. Yeah.
Under Armour
By
shirt.
the way, I did hit the Under Armour outlet, and I bought new wardrobe for the shows. So
Yes, but he's using Armor All protectant in the inside of his car. Right?
Right, Armor All. Sorry, yes, I do.
I have a big bag with
Uh-oh.
We'll let you go, Josh, but we're losing you a little bit. But it's wonderful seeing you. We'll see you back tomorrow for the show.
We'll see you back tomorrow. Have a
Yeah.
great show.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Wow.
How do I hang up?
I don't know. Just you got to hit the hang up button. I don't want
Crap, I hit the wrong button.
I don't
All
want
right, see you guys.
to send you out because you'll be
Oh,
blocked.
trooper. I got a trooper. See ya.
Oh boy. See you later. That's about a $6,000 fine there.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's fill in the gap there because Josh said he had a big bag of, and then it stopped. That if it's a big bag of what I think it is, the trooper's gonna have him in shackles.
No, that's not. No, Josh is just coming back with a big bag of laundry.
Yeah, there you go.
And yep, that would be it. That would be all there is to it. But yeah, that's Josh Rimmer from the highway. Yeah, I've never podcasted while driving. I would never suggest that ever in a million years. I can barely podcast while just sitting in my office. I'm lucky to be able to do that.
I wasn't gonna say a thing.
That's about it, right? Yeah, so we got lots to talk about today. We're gonna get into we're gonna get into the Maple Leaf situation. I know some people didn't like that on Twitter, but that's just tough. We are gonna get into the Maple Leaf situation for sure. We are definitely gonna get into the new changes on the draft because we weren't around last week to talk about these things and some of them happened, so I wanted to get into that too, and also into the signing that happened yesterday, which we just briefly touched on in Ottawa, but I think that it deserves a little bit more discussion, being that we have talked to some people since then who are sort of baffled by it, so we'll get into that too as well. But yeah, let's get going. There's not much going on here. My house is this is funny. This is the week where like the kids aren't in camp and aren't in school, so they are driving us crazy. Just basically, going batty, and and doing like, I mean, kids now, like when we were in school going into 4th grade, I don't remember ever having anything to do. My son has to read 4 books, like 400-page books, going into 4th friggin' grade. I mean, so they're basically, the kids are, we've threatened to not go to the beach next weekend for Labor Day weekend if they don't get their before school work done. So we're all sitting here watching, like hoping that they get that done, so we don't have to be those kind of parents. But
well, over the weekend when I stayed with some friends, I told you about my New York trip over the weekend, but they're currently going through a pain that you have recently gone through, and that is breaking. They have a new puppy.
Yeah.
And this new puppy, he likes to go to the bathroom everywhere. And they cannot control. I mean, we came back and it was all over the place, and it's just.
Well, yeah, this is the difference between, when you get actually boy puppies and girl puppies, which is fortunate. Girl puppies don't have that same desire as much, I found out, but boy puppies, they want to mark their territories, and oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, our girl puppy is pretty bad, but she's.
Yeah, this is a girl wire fox terrier puppy.
Oh, it is a girl puppy. Whoa.
And wire fox terriers are hunters.
Yeah.
And so she's just, and only 12 weeks old, and just going willy-nilly all over the place. So they were sleep deprived because a couple times at 3 o'clock in the morning events happened. So.
Oh yeah, that's nothing new.
Well, let's get on the little hockey.
Our dogs like to fight at 5 in the morning. They just decide that's when they want to fight. It's play fighting, but they wake up and they're like, okay, let's have at it. And it's rah. It sounds like two animals tearing each other apart. So we used to go down there and try to break them up and stuff like that. Now we just close the door and turn the fan on full tilt and just let them kill each other downstairs for a couple hours while we try to sleep it in. But yeah, here we are, guys. Let's start the show here. It's just Mike and I today. I tried to get Paige at the last minute, but and she wanted to come on, but she couldn't. Kevin will be back on Thursday. Kevin Allen will be back on Thursday and Friday. Josh will be back tomorrow. So we've got some more, but you and I have plenty to talk about today. So.
Oh sure.
Kevin. I want to wish one of our better fans, Brianna, who's out there. She happens to be my niece. Our first day of college today. It's pretty crazy. I cannot imagine that is possible. But good luck. She's a real big HockeyBuzzCast watcher. So good luck in college. Hopefully you don't get a chance to watch this show. You're working really hard. All right. Here we go. I've got a couple fun things to talk about. All right, so it's 26th of August.
Yep.
It's Tuesday. Yeah.
Yes, it's Tuesday.
Hey, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, August 26, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com, coming to you live today from Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, along with beautiful Cheektowaga, New York, or somewhere about there.
But downtown Buffalo.
Downtown Buffalo. So here we are. It's we're still in the dog days a little bit here, but after my rant yesterday, I got a lot of San Jose hate mail. I just wanted to say that, yeah. I mean, I still think I'm right, and I'll just let that be known. I still think I'm right on what I said about San Jose. I mean, it just, still to this day. But it does bring up another team that we will tend to get hate mail from, and that would be the Ottawa Senators, who made a rather interesting signing. I have an Ottawa game going on behind us, an Ottawa Maple Leafs game just for the fun of it, and another Maple Leafs game going down below that. As go back into the archives from I love Game Center on Apple TV. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, if it's an Ottawa Maple Leafs game, that means the Maple Leafs won because they always beat Ottawa.
Yes, this is late in the year. This is the last game of the year they played. You remember this goal, probably.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so this is late in the season.
Well, then Ottawa won then because Toronto didn't win anything late in the season.
But that goal was not allowed. There you go. So, yeah, Toronto didn't win anything. This is right at the end of the year. So, but... that being said, the Ottawa Senators made some news, Mike. Mm-hmm. What did they do?
Well, over the last week when we were off, they signed 2 players to extensions. One I expected because Clark MacArthur played very well in his first year with the Senators. I believe he had another year left in his deal, but they signed him to a 5-year extension for a little bit more than I thought he was going to get. He got over the average. The AAV was around $4.6 million, and I like Clark MacArthur. He's an effective forward. A little pricey, but if the cap is going to go up to $85-90 million, which a lot of people suspect, then I guess that's on par with what a quality forward would get. Yesterday or earlier in the week, they signed Craig Anderson to a 3-year deal. The first 2 years are front loaded. The third year is I think 3.1, but the average is $4.2 million for Anderson, who's over the age of 30. They have Robin Lehner under contract. He was apparently, he's been discussed as being the heir apparent in Ottawa, but they lock up Anderson for 3 more years, and I'm not sure if this is a case of, well, they're going to lock him up and then move him because he's got years left in his deal, or if their confidence in Lehner is declining. But I was a curious
signing him to an extension. I mean, literally signing him to an extension. I mean, not long ago at all, right? So I mean, we're talking about, and would their confidence in Lehner decline that quickly? I mean, the poor. I don't know. I mean, the crazy thing about this is it just didn't have to happen, Mike. I mean, we're looking at Cap Central now on Hockey Buzz, which is definitely the place you should go for all of your salary cap needs. But yeah, and you can see here, that this team doesn't have a whole lot of. I mean, they've got some cap space moving forward, and we only got $14 million this year, but they've got a lot of money tied up next year already for a team that's not very good. I mean, it's rare to see teams, in 2015-16 have already $45 million spent. I mean, that's a ton of cash.
Yeah, and some questionable. I mean, I'm not a big Milan Mihalik fan. I'm surprised that they re-signed. I mean, he's got a lot of talent, but he's been very inconsistent, very injury prone over the years. They signed him to a 3-year extension for $4 million.
Yep.
And the two that are very glaring there on the list are Bobby Ryan, who's a UFA at the end of the season, and Mark Mathot, who's a pretty solid defensive defenseman as a UFA next year. It's a question of if this team, and this is another team that is speculated to be in the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. And if you look at this roster, the only major additions that they made was adding David Legwand after trading Jason Spezza.
Exactly.
So it seems to me that they're in that situation where if halfway through the season they're closer to finishing in last overall than making the playoffs, they're going to jettison Ryan, they're going to jettison Mathot, and they're going to go down and try to get a high pick and try to get McDavid.
It seems that way, but like we said, I mean, they have $48 million tied up next year, in without having arguably their best forward in Bobby Ryan signed, and maybe their second best defenseman in Mathot. I think that obviously they have a stud defenseman, no question about it, but beyond him, they really, what does this team have moving forward? And now you have almost $6.5 million tied up in goalies for the next 3 years, which if you don't have like a Ryan Miller or like a Jonathan Quick, you don't want $6.5 million tied up in your goalies. I mean, neither of these guys. I'd argue that both of these guys are number 2s right now, and they're both getting paid like number 1s. I mean, it's Leonard hasn't proven to be a number 1 yet.
Anderson, when he is on, is one of the best goaltenders in the league. The problem is he's off and on throughout his career. I mean, that year that he had in Colorado where he stood on his head and took a young Avalanche team to the playoffs, he was incredible. And a couple years ago, he had that great year with the Sens. The problem is he has these years in between where he can't stop a beach ball. So
right.
So
last year was both back and forth. Honestly, he had a rough year, but he also had 4 shutouts. So it's kind of a strange year for him in general. He can go hot and cold within a season too. And the question is though, is this the proper way to spend your money? There's a couple arguments. I heard one person say, actually assistant GM who I talked to yesterday, say, yeah, it is because they don't know what they have, and now they know at least they have 2 goalies they can count on at any time. Which is okay. I can see that argument, but. Was it necessary to sign Anderson now? I mean, they had him signed for the rest of the year. Was this guy going to be a sudden like UFA commodity as the year went on? I don't see that. I don't see him becoming like. So why do this now? I mean, this is the kind of signing that you feel like they could resent before the contract actually even kicks in. I mean, if Anderson goes south this year, and the contract hasn't even started yet, then what?
Well, I mean, the thing is, if Leonard does not succeed, then Anderson has the Sens between a rock and a hard place. Because if he's playing well and Leonard is not following through on his potential, then they might have to pay him more money, pay him $5 million a year. Instead of paying 4.2. So it's a proactive move. I understand it. I don't agree with it because he's too inconsistent of a goaltender, but I understand it from the sense that they want some certainty. That's another reason why they signed MacArthur. I mean, MacArthur was under contract for another year. He's a UFA at the end of this season, but if he puts up another big offensive year, he could probably make $5 million because 28, 29-year-old wingers who are effective scorers, they just don't hit the market anymore.
Right, that's true. I mean, that's a good point. I just I don't know. I have a hard. I don't know. It's a really strange move. It's a very loyal move by the Ottawa Senators with Anderson, who's been a good soldier for them, big time.
And let me just be a little bit critical of the Sens organization right now, because I agree with your assessment that Lanner is a little uncertain, and Anderson, we just talked about his inconsistency. They traded Ben Bishop. They got a second-round pick for Ben Bishop, and then they turned around and swapped him to Tampa in the deal for Corey Conacher, who's already gone from the organization. How would the landscape of their goaltending situation be different if they had just kept Bishop and either traded Leonard or traded Anderson?
And that is a really great point, because it occurred to me as well that maybe this is a little bit of a backdraft from trading Bishop. Like, here you traded Bishop, but you have to prove now that you believe in these two goalies you kept, right? Because you traded away a goalie who obviously is a very good goalie, and everybody is at this point saying, that Bishop's a star goalie. You traded him away, so now you're throwing money at the two goalies you kept. You in a way are justifying, in your, at least to your fan base, that you believe you made the right decision there, which is a hard thing to justify.
It is, and the thing that that Ottawa fans, I'm sure, realized watching last year is that team was very challenged defensively, and they really, the addition of David Legwand isn't going to change the fact that team was worse than the Leafs in terms of their defensive zone coverage. I mean, Erik Karlsson, for all the greatness he is in terms of being a Norris Trophy winning offensive defenseman, he still is very questionable in his own end. They have young players like Zibanejad and Turris and a few others who are more offense first guys. They don't really play well in their own zone, and that's where that team suffered. They suffered defensively, and these goaltenders, they're going to be worked, and they're going to be worked hard, and they're going to have to earn the money that they're being paid right now.
Yeah, and they definitely we've seen that Anderson and both these goalies have injury issues. So, I mean, there's no question if you have either one of them, you're going to need a second goalie in there. Neither one of these guys is going to play 65 games for you. That's not going to happen. So they are going to the two goalie system in a way, but it's just how many years? I mean, Anderson's 35 years old. Why this many years? Why this, I mean, couldn't they have extended him for 1 year? Couldn't they have waited until January to do that? I mean, to see what happens. I mean, maybe he's I mean, it's a great. I mean, if I'm Anderson, I'm signing that contract just faster than you can say Jack Robinson. I mean, you're out of there. That's a great contract for a 35-year-old goalie to sign who's coming off of a crazy year.
And the question is, how does this affect the goaltending market going forward? You have goaltenders like, and I'll just obviously because I'm focused on the Leafs, you have Jonathan Bernier as an RFA at the end of this year. He's making $2.9 million right now. If he puts up another year like he did last year and proves that he's a number one goaltender, he's going to be making probably close to what a guy like Ryan Miller is making, or Varlamov, who signed a long-term extension last year. So you're talking $5.5 to $6 million. And he can justify that by saying, I'm 26 years old, and they're paying Craig Anderson $4.2 million.
Right. Well, he's at least worth $5 million, I think, next year, Bernier. Even if he has a half decent year. I mean, even if it's not a crazy year, he's at least $5 million, because he does have the Leafs a bit over a barrel right now. I mean, not completely, because they still have Jeff Reimer there, but that whether or not how that plays out is still to be determined. But Bernier is definitely their number one guy. We'll get to the Leafs in a second.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat room, Victor, says Anderson's like the new Patrick Lalime. I think that's a little bit rough. I wouldn't say he's a neo Patrick Lalime. I mean, Patrick Lalime, remember, had his moments where he was pretty phenomenal, and then had his moments towards the end where he wasn't so phenomenal. I would say Anderson, shares that to a degree, but Anderson was great and has had his moments where he's been absolutely great. But I still think that Anderson's all around a better goalie. He's a great guy. He's a fantastic person. I'm happy for him as far as the contract goes. And having covered him even a little bit in the U.S. camp, he's a really top person and a quality guy to have around the locker room and all that stuff. But is he? It seems like, I mean, to be a backup, which he should be by the end of this contract, or else the Ottawa Senators have bigger problems. I mean, he should be the end. He should be a backup. If not after this year, after next year, you shouldn't have a 37, 38-year-old goalie being your starter.
And this could also be a commentary on the depth of their organization in goal. I mean, I'm looking at their depth chart right now, and you have Andrew Hammond and Chris Dredger. I mean, I've never really heard a lot about these two goaltenders. So this might be the fact that Leonard's going to be our number one eventually, Anderson's our number 1 or 1B, and we've solidified our goaltenders for the next 3 years, and they may address the future in terms of goaltenders in the draft next year or by a free agent signing or something. But that might be the case. They really don't have a lot of depth there.
True. I mean, that's a possibility. I agree. I don't know. We'll see. Now the NHL this past week while we were away also made a big announcement, and I can bring it up here, that they announced that they were changing the NHL draft lottery system. And this is something that I kind of have been, I know you, Mike, we talked about this before a lot back in the old audio podcast days. Mm-hmm. This is actually now 14. So 14 of the non-playoff teams. So 14 of 30. So that's just under 50%. And soon, when there's 32 teams, will be even less than 50%. But 14 non-playoff teams will be adjusted to more appropriately reflect the current state of competitive balance in the league. This is basically saying that even if you make the playoffs, doesn't mean you're necessarily all that much better than the teams who don't make the playoffs, which I like. I think that's very true. Why stop at 14 though? That's just my thing. Let's look at the way it works here first of all. So, there's a couple other things here too as well, and they're actually I'm trying to remember exactly how they're doing this, but they're somehow easing this in over the next 2 years.
Well, this is what they're doing. For next year, say for example, a team finishes in 30th place and they lose the lottery. The lowest that they can finish is with the second pick.
Right.
Tim Murray, the general manager of the Sabres, probably popped open a bottle of celebratory.
Right. They still know that they're going to get one of those guys.
Right. If they finish in 30th and they lose the lottery, they still get Eichel or McDavid, whoever gets picked.
Right.
Doesn't get picked first. Next year, if that's the case, what they're doing is they're having essentially 3 lotteries.
Right.
And a team 30th overall could finish as low as 4th. Mm-hmm. So that's where I think eventually it's going to be a little more fairer for those teams that finish 5 through 14. You can see from the list here that essentially the lowest ones, their percentages doubled. The teams from 6 through 10, their percentages went up significantly, but it went down from 25% to 20% for the number 1 pick and from 18% to 13% for the number 2 pick.
Right.
So they're just spreading out the odds a little bit, but I think that there would have been a lot of blowback by the teams who have already structured their teams to maybe make a run at McDavid this year if the league had implemented this change right away for the 15 draft, because that, to me, that's inherently unfair. You're basing your strategy on what you think the rules are, and if all of a sudden you change the rules, then I think you.
All right, but is that unfair? I mean, think about it for a second. Think about what you just said there. I mean, you're saying that it's unfair for these teams who are basing their strategies, aka tanking.
No, not as we've said before, maybe tanking is a wrong word to use, but it is strategy. And, right now it's like, the Buffalo Sabres, and I'll use them as an example, but there are other teams out there, Florida, Calgary, a few others.
Right.
It was not possible for them in free agency and in the draft and, the combination of everything that they could do to make that team a playoff team in the span of 1 year. I don't think it was possible.
Right.
I don't think that they're tanking. I just think that you look at their goaltending, they lost Ryan Miller. Now this year they have Jonas Enroth and they have Michael Neuwirth. Their defense is essentially the same. They added Josh Georges. They added Andre Mazzaros, replacing the players who departed. They added Brian Giunta for the departed Steve Ott. They bring back Matt Molson. They're essentially the same team that finished 30th overall. They're not throwing the season. I don't think any season ticket holder would be buying season tickets if they came out and said, we're throwing the season. But what they're doing is they're managing expectations. They're going to let their youngsters get experience a lot. But with that comes the mistakes, and I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to have these players learn from their mistakes in the NHL during the regular season, and they are aiming at finishing 30th overall. They won't say that. They can't say that.
Right.
I'm saying it.
I get it. I mean, I get it, and you're right, and it's a really good point and well made. I'm not. I don't know. It's a very old debate, but I think that. So the other change in this that we should talk about too, just because that debate is almost unwinnable. I do understand you really made that point well, and you're exactly right on what you're saying. I'm not going to disagree with any of it. I think the 1 through 3 spot now it used to be that you couldn't fall lower, like you said, than 2. Now you can fall to 4, as I understand it.
Yeah, for 2016 you can fall to 4. They
Right.
will have 3 separate lotteries for the first 3 picks.
Right. The lottery thing is another thing is this. I think the lottery needs to be held like the 7 o'clock lucky 3 number lottery is held. I mean, does it bother you at all that they come in from another room with envelopes? This lottery is taking place behind closed doors. Can't we have a real ping pong ball machine? Doesn't the NHL have the ability to actually make this happen? Is it just a computer? I mean, there seems way too much space here for potential disaster or your speculation. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I know I've referenced this before. We go back to the old NBA draft
Right.
from the '80s when Patrick Ewing was in the draft and the New York Knicks won the first pick. And the rumor, the urban myth was that the envelope that the Knicks were in was a frozen envelope, so the person picking the envelopes out of the barrel knew which one it was for the Knicks. I don't know if that's true. I mean, could it be a more open, more visually pleasing type of lottery presentation? Maybe. I just know this, and I know that I've heard speculation that all 30 teams would have a chance at in a future scenario, like the team that wins the Stanley Cup would have like a 0.5.
This is definitely moving towards that.
Right. If that happens, and I've said this before, if that happens, and you have a Connor McDavid in the draft, and a team like Philadelphia, New York, Toronto, or Montreal, an established team wins that lottery, you're going to hear fix. You're going to hear. Something, or if when we brought up this kid, I think his name is Austin Matthews, who's from Arizona, who's probably considered possibly being the number 1 pick a couple years from now. You have the Arizona franchise, a troubled franchise. How much would it benefit that franchise if they could get an Arizona kid as the number 1 pick?
Right.
I think if you open up this lottery to all 30 teams, you open up the speculation of more of this chicanery going on. And I think it's better if you're a non-playoff team, you have a chance to get the number 1 pick. The situation that they have right now makes sense. I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's because, again, it's hard. I mean, we've seen this before, and I did it last year. I got to bring up the article. I got that. Really, what there are in the NHL is there are big, like 5 or 6 elite teams usually, and there's 2 or 3 teams that are just horrible, and then the middle from like 6 to 15, or 6 to like say even 17, are pretty. They might be separated by like 5 or 6 points sometimes, and I mean, with the exception of a couple teams, I think that. So that's why cutting it off at 14 is a hard number to cut it off at, because 13 and 14 could be really close, and we've seen teams that finish 14th in the league go like to the Stanley Cup Finals. So it doesn't really. They're still in the draft lottery. I think just every team needs. I think this should have just been the way they did it. The way they did it the year they did it after the lockout for Crosby was awesome. I mean, it was awesome because you watched the entire event and it was one team at a time being thrown up there. Everybody had a shot. I loved it.
Well, I mean, what I think would be fairly cool would be if eventually a team, because I don't believe we've had a team that finished any lower than, say, 4th has moved up to win the number 1 pick. I don't think there's been a team that was lower down. If a team that finished like 22nd or 21st, had that one chance in 10 or one chance in 12 of getting the number 1 pick, if that happens, then I think this lottery would gain a little more maybe credibility, maybe more excitement. Yeah. Right now it's like if Edmonton finishes in the bottom 3, they're probably going to get the number 1 pick because they always get the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
So let's see how it works. Next year there'll be some very interested parties, and I think again one thing that's going to be interesting is midway through the season, you're going to see a bunch of trades, and I think this is going to extend our trade rumor coverage to a long time before the trade deadline, is the fact that you're going to have a bunch of teams that at a certain point in the year, they're going to be making trades, and other teams that have space, salary cap space, they can make those deals to get some players.
Yeah, and they can, and that's we're going to see that. We're going to see a very good, because this draft is so good, we're going to have a fun trade deadline. There's no question about that. I do agree. There's going to be a lot more teams. I mean, I talked to somebody about this the other day, and they said, okay, there's two sides to that, right? Because I'm always looking at the trade deadlines, because it's our business here. We're always looking to see how interesting they'll be and stuff like that, what players are involved. And at the end of the day, they said, okay, on one hand, yes, you've got that you're going to be more trades because of teams are going to be tanking, but on the other hand, you're going to have less first-round draft picks going than ever before. So that's usually what drives the trade market as well. So we should see more player-for-player trades, but we're not going to see anybody giving up first-round draft picks this year, although you could see first-round draft picks 2 years from now, although 2 years from now the draft is also pretty strong. So from what I've heard, I think we're just getting into very, very strong drafts here. And then trading first-round draft picks becomes less and less of an option, especially when you see what first-round guys do in the beginning of the, in the NHL. They a lot of them make impacts right away.
And in the salary cap realm, you cannot dispute the fact that not only are you getting a good young player, who could make your team at 18 years old, but even if you wait a couple years with the slide rule of the contracts, you're going to get yourself an effective player maybe starting at age 20 for 3 years at under $1 million, which in a salary cap situation really helps a team.
Oh, it's enormous. It's enormous. I mean, when you can have a top 6 forward or a top 4 defenseman on a rookie contract, you're getting an immediate advantage. There's no question about it, and that's what we're seeing in Colorado. You're going to see that the Colorado can go out and get a Ginla because McKinnon's on a rookie contract. That makes a difference. You can get these guys that are 1 or 2 year fixes. Because you've got these big guys on your big contracts. So, I mean, I think two things. I think we really have to get to the point where every team has a shot, and I also think that we have to have a legitimate live in front of us lottery where these balls pop around. I really feel that that's important, and I'm not just a part of it's a joke, it's like the 7 o'clock lottery or whatever on TV. But you know what? If that lottery was done just as numbers being drawn and not real ping pong balls in front of us, people would freak out. I mean, every night, if the 3 ping pong balls that drum up for the evening daily number, or even when you see the mega numbers, these are real machines drawing real numbers, and the reason that's happening is because there's a lot of money being spent, and it's so easy to fix this. I mean, it's so easy to fix it, and I don't know, I can't see any way that that they don't go to something that really is legitimate, because I hate the envelope thing. I just hate it. Yeah.
Well, they may change it, but sometimes leagues are very slow to change and slow to get into modern day ways of doing things. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we will see. Okay. Also, so now I wanted to get into the big news that happened while we were away for Maple Leaf fans and and NHL fans in general, because this is a big deal. Tim Lewicki has decided, first we heard he was going to maybe step down, then the rumors were, no, he's not going to step down, he's not going to step down now, immediately, and it became apparent that, it was really just, like I said many times before, when you get a quote from somebody, you have to read exactly what they say, and what he said is exactly, I'm not going as of now, I'm not going yet, I'm staying here. It turns out he was indeed telling the truth. He's going to be leaving after this year. So, Mike, what were your initial thoughts on this?
Well, first I have to give kudos to Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada because he came out not this past Monday but the previous Monday on a Toronto radio station and said that Lewicki was going to leave Toronto, quote, soon.
Right.
And all the denials that happened after that were basically because soon does not specify exactly when. So he said, well, no, I'm not leaving, and then it came out that he was going to stay at least the season, and the press release that came out late last week essentially says he'll leave by June 30th of 2015 or sooner if MLS&E finds a new president before then. Now, I mean, first of all, in terms of the hockey operation, I don't think this has much of an impact unless you have a new team, a new MLS&E CEO and chairman who is completely opposed to Brendan Shanahan, and I don't think they would really hire somebody who would do that. I think Shanahan is going to have some time to direct the Leafs where he wants to direct.
Yes.
I think this has more to do with, and it's funny because what came out was Lewicki leaving may have had something more to do with the NFL bid between Larry Tannenbaum, Ed Rogers, John Bon Jovi, and the Buffalo Bills situation, which that has basically fallen apart. When Lewicki came to Toronto, there was speculation that he was going to get a part of that team and be part of that ownership group if they were able to bring an NFL team to Toronto. That bid has fallen flat in its face, and the NFL apparently wants to stay in Buffalo. But from everything I hear, I mean, the report from John Shannon late last week said it's possible he could go to Comcast. It's possible MSG. He may be going back to L.A. to be part of the L.A. Clippers organization, who just got bought by Steve Ballmer. So I mean, he's got options.
That's gonna be funny. I can't imagine Lewicki and Ballmer in the same organization. But yeah, go on.
But the thing is, and this rumor about him leaving prematurely started back in January and February. Yeah. Bob McCowan from Primetime Sports, a guy who has been in Toronto for eons, who knows the scene, was saying that Lewicki's wife did not like Toronto, did not like the winter in Toronto, and that was a contributing factor to him wanting to leave. But you've got two warring factions in MLS&E between Rogers and Bell Media, the owners of Sportsnet and TSN, and that ownership group is dysfunctional, is a kind word, and I don't think that it's going to last, through the years. But these two corporations that are fighting tooth and nail for media coverage like the NHL. I don't think that it's going to work. Eventually, I think there's going to be one side buying out the other, but it's, I think he was the buffer between the two, and maybe he just got tired of being the buffer.
Yeah, I think that's what happened, and I mean this MLSE situation is a weird one, right? I mean, we've seen odd circumstances before. I mean, the way Brian Burke was relieved of his duties, this is nothing. I mean, Lewicki is not that dissimilar than Burke in some ways, and personality-wise, I'm sort of not surprised that maybe something that happened. Lewicki saw, before I end up being Brian Burke myself, I might get the heck out of here and keep his value high. That's kind of what it felt like to me. Mm-hmm. And also, he may. I mean, I'm sure he talked to people before. I mean, Tim Lewicki is a really smart businessman, and he knows. I'm sure that when Shanahan was hired, Lewicki said, "I might not be here." I would bet $1 million that happened. That Shanny knew about this before he even took the job. So anyone who's going to say, this is a problem with Shanahan, no, it's not. And Shanahan doesn't get the job. Lewicki doesn't give him the job unless the other people at MLSC want Shanny there as well. So I think that's Shanahan doesn't leave. He was in a very good situation. And remember, Shanahan was very much in line for several GM spots. So he took a job that wasn't a GM spot just because he wanted to go back to his hometown team. So it really, Shanahan made some big sacrifices for MLSC, and I don't think that went unnoticed. So I don't think Shanahan's going anywhere. I really don't. And if anywhere he's going, and if anything, Shanahan's taking notice his job. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and Lewicki. He improved the soccer team in Toronto. He improved the Toronto Raptors. He put a new general manager in place for the NBA Toronto Raptors. He put Shanahan in control of the Leafs. So he pretty much he had set forth his direction for MLS&E. And I think you're right in the sense that Burke and Lewicki are very strong personalities, very upfront, very. And I'm sure they had in their contracts, I know Burke did, that he really had complete control. And I think when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar corporation like MLS&E, they don't want anyone having complete control other than the MLS&E board. And for their purposes, I don't blame them, but that's sometimes not the right way to run a franchise like the Maple Leafs. You've got this faceless. First you had this faceless Ontario Teachers Pension Fund running them. Now you have this faceless monolith of Rogers and Bell running the team.
Monolith is a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So
very weird situation.
Yeah, until you have a singular owner, a person, somebody who says the buck stops here. A guy like Terry Pegula in Buffalo. The thing is that MLS&E and the Maple Leafs are so big and so expensive that I don't know if there's a person out there who can afford to buy that lock, stock, and barrel. It may be corporate ownership from here on out, but I know that from the fans' perspective, that having this massive corporation being in control, it's a little disconcerting because they don't know really who to complain to when things go bad.
Right, and that is a problem. And and so far when they have brought in strong personalities, example with Burke and Lewicki, both have not worked out. That's strong personalities in a situation like they're in right now is a problem. That's what's obviously going on right now. The strong personality part of it. I mean, you can see, Burke was pretty shocked, and they gave Burke a lot of time. You give him credit on Burke. They let him go a long time, I thought. They fired him at a very weird point for considering what they had let him do. But with Lewicki, I think he just saw the writing on the wall. I do.
Yeah, and he wants to have an ownership stake in the franchise. I think he might be tired of just being a team president, being a CEO. He might be able to put a group together someplace to buy a franchise and be his own boss. And if that's the case, then this was an exit strategy that worked for him. If not, he might be able to find a situation that's better for him in a place where the weather is better, so his wife would not complain as much.
And that could be. I mean, it could always be something like that too. But to me, his guys like this, they're really smart business guys that move up the ladders very quickly. They know how to control their own. They know how to control their own destinies, and they know when to get out, and they know when to get in. And this Lewicki's leaving is probably something to do with more of the fact that he could see where the kind of things he wanted to do weren't going to fly. And he got to do what he could do, and maybe they even told him, you come in here just to get this part. I mean, they may have just looked at him like a temporary fix themselves, but however you slice it, I think that I don't think this affects Toronto very much, with the exception of the fact that I do think that the Nonis situation is still really messed up. That goes down to the coach as well. I think this has got to be a very short leash, and I think this makes it even shorter. I really do. I think Lewicki leaving makes it even shorter on Nonis and Babcock. I really do feel that way.
Well, Lewicki was a champion of Nonis, but from every indication, I mean, we've talked about this before. Shanahan came in, they cleaned out the assistant coaches, they cleaned out the assistant general managers, they cleaned out everybody but the top 6 and the top 4 defensemen on the team. So they changed the guts of the organization. All the new assistant coaches, new assistant GMs, an analytics department, all this, but the top, Carlisle, Nonis has not changed. Shanahan and Nonis apparently are getting along well. There's he likes Nonis, and Nonis is, as we've said before, has been comfortable in a position before where he was the number 2 to a stronger-willed guy like Burke.
Right.
And that's the situation now with Shanahan. I mean, Shanahan is pushing the buttons, and Nonis is doing the work, and I think it's working. Where I think the immediate change will happen if the Leafs don't play well is Carlisle. I mean, Carlisle is on a short leash. They gave him a 2-year contract, but that was pretty much a golden parachute. If they play well this year, then he'll play out the contract, and if they don't play well, they'll fire him, and then they might be in the Mike Babcock sweepstakes if he doesn't renew his contract with Detroit.
Right, and that's where I can see this going. I really can, and it makes some sense. I mean, this is definitely. I mean, Toronto has had that. They had their run. They went. They went 7 games with Boston, and then they had a big fallback, which is not uncommon this year. So this year is going to be the year we see which direction they're heading. Are they really heading in the right direction or the wrong direction? This will be it, and I think we'll know very soon. I would put odds at like 50-50 that both Nonis and Babcock, and that I would say Nonis, maybe I'll say Nonis, 50-50 that he makes it through the year. I think that it's really going to come down to where they are. But that's just my thought on it. And I know that I like the coach. I think the coach is strong, but I think that there's a long way to go here. And they have to show, and they're in a tough. It's just harder to make the playoffs now than ever has been before. I mean, it really is. The NHL is a league that, when we were growing up, everybody made the playoffs. Now
from 16 of 21 to 16 of 30. So.
Right. So it's way harder to make the playoffs, and you really have to be. You have to be close to 100 points to make the playoffs now in the NHL. That's crazy, right? So that's the big difference. Moving on to another topic. It was kind of an interesting infographics. This comes from Graphs. Graphs.net. I'm trying to find out who did this. I really like this a lot. It basically did infographics on hockey fights, and I like this. I like this stuff. I'm a big infographics fan. Let me show you what we have here. This is Graphs.net. I'll put it on for you guys. So basically here, and you can find this on Reddit as well. If you look at the Reddit hockey feed, that's where I got it from. So a decade of hockey brawls, and this is kind of interesting. Like 1,230 games every NHL year, below the total amount of incidences in the last 10 NHL seasons. And you see how in 2000 it goes from 684, and back and forth, right around 1 year with fights, 1 year without fights. And then coming out of the lockout, we went to this. We had a shortened season, obviously, so we had 497 fights in the lockout shortened season. But then we've gone and we're back up right about where we were before. So it feels to me like fighting has dropped off. I mean, this is through 2010, so I would like to see the numbers actually pass that, because I think that we've gotten a lot better. But it really feels like hockey has been falling off of fighting more than this list implied.
Yeah.
But this infographics sort of show up, and I don't know. I kind of liked it. I thought that there's just a lot of cool, like who fights the least, the Red Wings or the least, the fight the least in the NHL. That is not super surprising.
Well, I mean, let's just say this. I mean, I know that the numbers dropped last year. I'm pretty sure they did, and I mean, you can see the trend, especially with the two teams that faced each other in the Stanley Cup final. Those were teams that were four-line teams, and not four. Everybody's a four-line team, but they were teams that had four lines of players who could play multiple roles. I'm actually writing a blog about this today, where talking about the Leafs and what they did in the off season. They can't afford to play Fraser McLaren, Colton Orr, and Jared Smithson or somebody like that on their fourth line anymore. They have to play players who can score, who can play special teams. And I think the Rangers arguably had the best fourth line in hockey last year. The Kings' fourth line was excellent. And that depth, you cannot have top six forwards playing, a regular shift, playing power play and shorthanded. And Toronto, that's what happened last year. You had guys like Van Riemsdyk who were playing on the power play, playing shorthanded, playing regular shift, and by the end of the year, and then also playing in the Olympics, and by the end of the year, were so burned out that they could barely lift their stick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you need third and fourth line players who can play penalty kill, who can maybe play on second power play units, who can play a checking role and not load your top two lines so much. And that does not allow for guys who are fighters. The Milan Lucic's of the league, they're not common anymore. He's a top six forward who could beat the crap out of you. I think that fighting would still be there if you had that type of player pervasive throughout the league, but he's the exception rather than the rule. So I don't think you're going to have designated fighters anymore. I don't think you're going to have rock'em sock'em robots like Colton Orr anymore.
Right, you aren't.
You're going to have players who can play.
These guys have to play, and I went to HockeyFights.com to get the most recent statistics. They do a great job, and as you can see on here, it does more or less. It says a fight is counted when at least one or more player involves receiving a fighting major. So that's how they decided it on here. And you can see in the 2013-14, it goes down to 469, right? So, and 2012, that was a lockout year. So, 347. 347 is so it's about fights per game was kind of up in the lockout year, which is interesting. But now there's, 0.38 fights per game, which is really, not that many. I mean, there are only 78 games with more than one fight in them in the entire NHL year. You're talking about 1,200 games. So, that's percentage of games with fights, 29.76%. That's 30%. 30%. That's still kind of high. It's higher than I would think. From watching games, I wouldn't think that every one out of every 3 games I was watching had a fight in it last year. It just seemed like it. And I'm watching the Philadelphia Flyers, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I just figured out the percentage from the lockout year. The percentage was, it actually has it there. I mean, almost you only had about 120 less fights in a 48-game schedule than in an 82-game schedule the following year. So the percentage is going down, unfortunately, and because I'm someone who was raised in the 70s and 80s. I love fighting. I think it's a part of the game, but the concern over concussions.
Yeah.
I mean, how long did we hear about George Peros and Colt Knorr after that fall that Peros took? And Peros was he was followed throughout the year in terms of concussion problems. The whole Brooks Orpik, Sean Thornton situation, things like that are going to make fighting less and less likely. Not only getting one-dimensional players out of the game, but also the concussion lawsuits and things of that nature, I think, is going to have a chilling effect on it. It's unfortunately we're going to have to watch hockey fights on video to satisfy our Jones of watching hockey fights, because I think,
or watch preseason games, because check this out. Last year in the preseason, 56.73% of the games had fights in them. So that's up from 30%. So you're looking at almost twice as many fights in the preseason. This is, obviously you see a lot
and that was just the Toronto Buffalo game where John Scott got chopped by Phil Kessel.
Right, exactly. And the amazing stat on this is last year in the NHL, the entire season, 1,200 games, right? Only 288 players got involved in fights in 1,200 games, and in 104 preseason games, 149 players got involved in fights. So you're looking at, geez, I mean that's almost exactly half the amount of players in one less than 1/10 the amount of games. So I mean, you're talking about a really big number. Preseason games is where you might get your happiness in for fighting, and those numbers have always been higher, obviously, than the NHL. But when you look at the NHL, this was the first year, I guess, where less than 30% of the games had fights in them.
Now the question is, and I don't know where we could find it, is how many high sticking penalties, high sticking majors, things of that nature, if that went up in the last couple years while the corresponding number of fights went down, because that's always been the connection in terms of deterrence.
Yeah.
You have players who carelessly use the stick. You have players, or even the number of head hits. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are saying is that head hits, the reason they happen is, and they'll happen more frequently, is because there is no deterrent to somebody throwing a check like that. If you have a player, Wayne Gretzky probably would have been hit pretty hard if Dave Semenko and Dave Lumley and some of these big guys that they had on the Edmonton Oilers weren't on that team. So.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. I mean those guys were there for a very specific reason, and there's no doubt.
Marty McSorley, there you go.
Yeah, who had to, remember Gretzky required him to be part of the trade to LA. So I mean there's a lot of things there that we know about that there's no question that exists still. But I think that we're really seeing a big turn away from it, and one of the things that's interesting about fighting and the cyclical aspect of fighting and just violence in hockey in general is that you'll see a turn away from it right before you'll see a team that is very physical take over again. It's almost like it's almost like the old if we don't have guns we won't be able to defend ourselves type thing. You get rid of the bullies, and suddenly a team that has a lot of tough players can really intimidate, and things change. It's been going that way since the 50s in hockey, and right now I can definitely feel like we're getting rid of the enforcers, we're getting rid of that, and I wonder if we're going to see enforcers again, or if we're just going to see, like you said, sort of like a new kind of enforcer who is more.
I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see a new kind of enforcer, or maybe the return of the middleweight, because I don't think that these big, slow players are going to have the ability to play in the speedy NHL. But if you have guys who can skate, can shoot, they may not be the most talented players in the world, but if they have the abilities to stay with the pace of the play and also provide a physical aspect to the game, then I think the LA Kings have a lot of those players. They have a lot of guys who can stay up to the speed of the game and also play a physical brand, and that enables them to do what they do.
So do the Blue Jackets too. Columbus this year is going to be a very physical team. You can see it. I mean, and they add, in adding Hartnell, they add another physical player. There aren't that many players in the NHL who have over who consistently will get you a bunch of goals and also get over 100 penalty minutes. But I think the Blue Jackets might have 3 of them now. If you consider Horton is healthy, he's one of those type guys too. And the Blue Jackets are going to be, and the fact that they're in the division with teams that have gotten smaller in Philly and Detroit, Philly and the Rangers and the Islanders and the Devils have all sort of gotten rid of some of their enforcers. That could start some wars. That could definitely start some wars. I think we've got some fun ahead of us in this division this year. I was talking to people. I just really think I'm trying to figure out. I'm starting to do my predictions now, and trying to predict the first through whatever in that division and this is just in the Metropolitan Division is by far the hardest.
What we should do, and I know that they have to be out there. There are over-unders for NHL teams in terms of how many points. Yep. We should you, Josh, and I, in a show closer to the season, we should maybe pick 5 over-unders and see who comes to either.
Definitely.
Not do the whole league, but maybe take 5 or 10 or something like that.
Oh, I agree.
Who's the best?
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I guess that is all the time we have for today, guys. We will be back tomorrow. Josh will be back with us, and we may have a guest tomorrow. Kevin Allen will be back with us on Thursday, and and then we're getting in. There won't be a show on Monday of next week because that is Labor Day in America and Canada. So you guys are all going to take a break that day. But we will be back on Tuesday, and we didn't get into today, which we will get into tomorrow, is more of the camp invite situation, which is going on right now. And that is like a whole nother can of worms and a whole new rumor season that has just picked up in the last few years. And this year, a lot of players are going to get camp invites. Right now, I talked today in my blog a little bit about the rumor that Bill Meltzer put out there, which is not just Bill's, but I've heard it as well that the Flyers are looking at Dustin Penner and Ryan Malone as camp invites. And I don't disagree, and we're not getting any denials on it either. Although the thing is this, with camp invites, I think that right now those guys have also been invited to other teams as well, from what I've been able to tell. And right now, camp invites are a whole different story. They're fun to talk about. We'll talk about it tomorrow for sure, because they're a fun ball of wax to approach. And because I remember one time watching Brian Berard at a camp invite, and he was in the middle of a practice, and he left. And why'd you leave? Well, my agent found me another camp invite, and I'm going to that one instead. Just they can leave in the middle of practices. It's crazy. It's a funny situation as it goes on. So that's all the time we have. But guys, thanks so much for watching. Remember, you can follow Mike at Mike in Buffalo. I'm at Eklund, and we will be back tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Talk to you soon.